So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar. Thank you very much for making the time today. I'm hoping that you'll find the next sort of 45 minutes or so both useful and hopefully even a little bit entertaining, dare I say it. The theme that we're talking about today is the idea of balancing relationships and revenue. A lot of agency clients at the moment, a lot of agencies at the moment are very nervous about how they should be managing their client relationships. What tactics should they be taking? To what extent do they need to balance helping clients with looking after the bottom line? How do they manage relationships that are going through huge amounts of change? And how do they make sure in the end that they come out the other side of this with those relationships not just intact, but actually in a great place? For those of us who are in the service industries, this can be quite a difficult balance to achieve. The idea of getting relationship versus revenue can be a difficult balance to achieve at the best of times. But when things are a little bit choppy on the seas, it can be even worse. So I'm hoping today to be able to give you both some quick pointers and some things to think about, thinking through how you balance relationships and revenue, but also perhaps to dig a little bit deeper, to understand where some of those concerns might be coming from, and to understand perhaps some of the deeper work that needs doing to remove them. So a little bit about me first of all. So you can see a fantastic picture of me there, smiling at you down the screen. But basically, I spent about 20 years looking at organisational performance. I spent about the first 15 years of my career working in both the creative industries and also management consulting. And over that time, a question kept bubbling up in my mind. I was surrounded by all of these people with loads of talent, loads of good ideas, loads of energy, loads of passion for what they were doing. And very, very rarely in both the creative agencies I was working at and in the consulting industry did all that talent and energy and ideas ever become greater than the sum of its parts. It seemed to me that as we built, as businesses got built, as they grew, that what we were building was systems and processes that actually trampled down the talent that existed in most of those businesses. And it's quite a complicated question as to why we do that. Why is it that we start businesses with loads of energy and loads of enthusiasm and loads of ideas, and that's all the good stuff that's coming through that allows businesses to get off the ground. But then in the end, as we build our businesses and we grow, actually, that stuff just gets pushed further and further and further down. So why that happens is quite complex, but the reason is also the reason that I started Corporate Punk. So Corporate Punk exists really for a very simple reason, which is to help organisations be their most authentic, energetic best. We say we exist to make businesses more resilient, responsive and innovative. And we do that for businesses all around the world, businesses including Sony and the BBC, Invesco, we work with KPMG, we work with a lot of high growth businesses as well. I've been doing this work for a good few years now. I was lucky to be recognised by the MCA for it last year. I also write a globally syndicated column for Forbes on leadership strategy, which goes out once or twice a week to a worldwide audience. And finally, I still retain quite an interest in supporting agency businesses, which is why I've made time to do this today. I sit on the boards of quite a few, and I act as a mentor and advisor to a range of agencies and creative industry firms outside of that, which is part of my work I absolutely love. It's great to maintain an interest in doing, in supporting agencies and helping businesses that are trying to do their creative best to be able to grow. So let's talk about what's going on out there at the moment, and let's talk about the backdrop to why balancing relationships and revenue can feel so difficult. So in general, it feels like most organisations and a lot of leaders fear change. The reason they fear change is actually because they fear their ability to cope with change. We kid ourselves that we think the world is kind of static and that everything's very stable. It's actually not true. Things are always changing and shifting around. You can see it in nature all the time, for example. But we kid ourselves that everything's stable, and we kid ourselves also that change is something to be feared. And the reason is, as I say, they fear their ability to cope. Now we're right there. We're right in the middle of the coronavirus crisis. We're right in the middle of a huge economic crisis. And we're actually seeing that fear ripple around the world. And it's happening in real time. You know, you can see it being reported on by the press. You can see it in people's panics about making ends meet when it comes to the end of the month and so on. So we're right there, and we're right in that moment of quite considerable change at the moment. What that means then is that, you know, a lot of the time our reptilian and limbic brain, parts of our brain, the reptilian and limbic parts of our brain, are just kicking off massively. So they're the parts of our brain that are both non-conscious from an emotional point of view, but also the parts that actually just fundamentally exist to keep us safe. They will stop us, you know, walking across the road in front of a car, for example. So what happens is when a moment of great change arrives, that reptilian and limbic brain kicks off, goes into fear, and creates all sorts of weird and wonderful behaviours. And those behaviours might be anything from simply stopping paying suppliers. It might be to pull the drawbridges up on future spend. It might be to furlough loads of staff, perhaps unnecessarily on occasions. It can be sometimes actually the conduit for some quite poor behaviour as well. And it can be really hard when you're on the other side of that to know how to respond to it. What do I do when I'm seeing clients in panic? What do I do when I see markets that are just all over the place compared to how they used to be? And there are loads of temptations then that come the way of not only agency owners actually, and those of us in the service industries, but for business owners in general. The temptations include things like giving away too much value. So simply just deciding that you don't run a business anymore and actually you're just going to give absolutely everything away. You might abandon your heritage, abandon your values. I'll talk about that later on, but walk away from the behaviours and the reputation that have made your business what it is today. Or you just default to hustling and doing anything for a quick quid. My position on this and what I'm going to share with you today is that doing those things tends in the longer term to create more problems than they solve. You ran a good business, I'm assuming, before you got on this webinar. You ran a good business before the corona crisis hit. You ran a good business before the economy started going back. And I'm going to say to you that you have a choice. You can still run a good business now, and actually you can see your business prosper as a result of the things that are happening, not falter. So, how to balance relationships and revenue when the world is in a blind panic. So the first thing we need to do is just actually smash a few myths. I want to kind of do this before I get into a more a sort of articulation of a more kind of proactive strategy. So let's smash a few myths for a start. The first one, and this is going to sound like an obvious point, and maybe a bracing one, is that actually there is a trade-off between relationships and revenue. There is, in the sense that actually you might deprioritize now for a little bit, completely you're trying to make money on everything. But let's also be clear, the only reason that you have a relationship with any client is because of the revenue that they deliver into your business. These aren't friendships, they're not family relationships, they're fundamentally professional relationships based on a clear value exchange. And when we lose sight of that, we lose sight of the foundation for almost everything that we're doing. The second thing then that follows very quickly from that is that it's a myth to try and be helpful at all costs. It's a myth that says we just got to help people, and actually we need to ignore our own bottom line. Actually, in the end, self-sacrifice benefits no one. What I'm going to say to you is, if you help everybody out, if you are overly generous, if you prioritize relationships over revenue to the extent that one totally outweighs the other, actually you run the risk of hobbling, or at worst, sacrificing your own business. Now, if you do that, you can't actually help anybody out in the future for money or for free. Your business has gone to the wall. Self-sacrifice, then, it doesn't benefit you, and it doesn't in the longer term benefit anybody that you're trying to serve. So in that context, what I'm trying to say is being helpful is good. We might want to find ways to be helpful to clients at the moment. We might want to deprioritize getting paid for everything, or have a conversation about payment terms. Being intelligently helpful is better. So that means looking for opportunities still to drive some revenue through the business, and also looking at how that help that you offer can set you up in the longer term. Not in a kind of ambulance chasing way, but actually because you want to be able to You want to be able to make sure that in the longer term, your business can survive and thrive so that you can serve your customers well. Another myth that clients can't pay. Well, actually, there is a different take on this. There's a difference between won't pay and can't pay. Clients that can't pay, for example, um, there will be some out there and they will need looking at. You'll need to have a think about what the terms that you offer. Is there a different way of structuring a commercial relationship? Actually, are you still willing to work with them? On the basis that, as I said earlier on, all client relationships are about an exchange of value. And if the client simply can't pay, there may be a question over their longer term viability, and we could be throwing good money after bad. But a client that won't pay, that's really worthy of examination. Now, in some cases, that's just indicative of really poor behaviour and really poor values. And you might want to be thinking about whether or not those are the right clients for you in the longer term. Sometimes, though, clients won't pay because actually your services, your agency, if you will, perhaps is not positioned in the right way. Price is only an issue when the value isn't clear. So actually, if a crisis is struck, a client of whatever sort, and your services suddenly become nice to have, not need to have, well, that's an interesting thing to think through, isn't it? Because actually, then of course, it may be that you are discretionary spend and that spend gets slashed. The interesting question then becomes, how do you re-articulate the value such that the price is not an issue and that you unblock that willingness to pay? And finally, this idea that, we're hearing this from a lot of creative businesses at the moment, the idea of irrelevancy. I just feel like I'm irrelevant now. I feel like, what we do doesn't really have a role in the world. This is absolute nonsense. The creative industries are amongst the most vibrant in the world and amongst and a great privilege to work around, fundamentally because they're full of people who can take really difficult problems and work out how to answer them in original ways. Creative problem solving is fundamentally the most needed skill in the world at the moment. It's needed in healthcare, it's needed in economics, it's needed in the context of business support. I mean, everywhere you look, we've got really complex problems that are erupting partly directly because of the coronavirus crisis, and also partly because we've just been stacking them up for a long time. We're stacking them up in our economies and the way that our society functions and so on. So your ability to solve problems well is the most needed skill. You may not have quite the right application of it at the moment, of course, which is what I was saying a few moments ago, but that doesn't mean that it's not an absolutely critical skill in principle. And as I say, that the need for creativity extends well beyond healthcare. So if you think about balancing relationships and revenue, really what I'm saying, just as a sort of foundation point here, is that you've got to be very clear on the basis that your client relationships exist in the first place. You've got to be clear that helpful is good. We all want to be helpful to each other at this time, but the preservation of your own business is absolutely critical in order to be able to help people in the longer term. It's also worth looking at, when clients are behaving badly, perhaps examining what's going on there before you give them a hall pass. And at the same time, and we'll talk more about this as this webinar goes on, making sure that you're not letting your self-image dive as a result of this. You have not become irrelevant, you've become more relevant. And I think if you can hang on to that, that's a great foundation, not only for everything we're going to talk about today, but for helping navigate your business through the next few weeks and months. The number one actual problem when these myths are occurring, when people think they need to be overly self-sacrificing in the help that they offer, that they need to give clients a hall pass for all sorts of behaviour, that they're worrying about whether or not they have any role to play in the world, the number one actual problem going on there is fundamentally imposter syndrome. I did a podcast about, when was it? About a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. You can look it up on YouTube and, iTunes and Spotify. It's called the Fuel Podcast with a friend of mine called Keith Smith, who does some fantastic work in agency new business. And I talked for about half an hour about imposter syndrome, so I won't repeat it today. So if it's a subject that's of interest to you, go and have a listen to that podcast. But basically, what I was saying was, in brief, what I was saying was, we are not trained to think of creativity as a valuable skill. It is not a high status industry or vocation in the way that other other things are. And you know, it's one of those, and it's something that, because also we're not professionally trained business managers a lot of the time, we feel like we're kind of winging it. All of those things contribute to this sense of imposter syndrome, which basically means we're not grounded in our own value. It means we're not actually confident in a deep emotional sense in what we're actually offering. And you will not do the right thing for your clients, for your own business, if you're not grounded in your value. So if these are the sort of things that are kicking on, the boat's got really rocky, right? These are the sort of, you know, it's become a bit, it's going to be an interesting few months. And you're not clear on your own value, it's going to give rise to all those other issues that I've already been talking about. So look, let's get in. So if that's the foundation, and we want to think about how we work with clients and how we deliver service to clients over the course of the coming weeks and months, let's think about a really sort of proactive set of strategies for that. And I'm going to talk to you about something we call the Fight Back, which is, we have a series called Recession Rebellion at the moment. And the Fight Back is, I'm going to talk to you about the Fight Back service that we offer later on. But the idea of the Fight Back is, let's come out of this recession in the best place that we've ever been as a business. That's the sort of core principle of it, really. And there's 3 steps to it. The first step is to stabilize. The second step is to energize. And the third step is to strategize. And then beyond that, of course, there's all the execution as well. So let's just talk about stabilizing for a while. What does that actually mean? I kind of alluded to some of this already, but I just wanted to make it absolutely crystal clear. Fit your own oxygen mask first. If you are not surviving, if you are not in a place that is a good, strong, solid place, then actually you can't help anybody else. You can't service customers in the longer term. You're only hobbling your own ability to bring your unique value into the world. So fitting your own oxygen mask means the following. Existing clients, you need to lock down work where you can. You might need to negotiate on terms. You need to be watching out for that can't pay versus won't pay dynamic that I talked about earlier on. But fundamentally, this is the time for grown-up conversations. It's the time when, you know, you can withdraw perhaps some of the relational capital that you may have built up in the emotional bank account with your clients. But you need to lock down that work and make sure that over the next few weeks and months, you've got as much visibility of it as you possibly can. You also want to be looking at outgoing costs. Now, I'm going to talk about values later on. It's really, really important that you need to balance relationships and revenue, also in the context of your supplier and partner relationships as well. Of course, we want to look at cutting all unnecessary costs. But let's think about 2 things. The first thing is, let's not sacrifice good quality relationships with people that can help us in the future. If we treat our suppliers and our partners badly now, they will remember it and it will come back and bite our business at some point in the future. The second thing is also that we don't want to be cutting in ways that are actually only going to hinder our own ability to grow. So, you know, at some point, the world, which maybe has done that for a little bit now, is going to start doing that. It's going to start coming back up again. And we want to be in a position where we can, you know, scale in accordance with those, you know, the rising demand that we're seeing. And if we've sort of cut the wrong things out of the business, then we're going to have a problem being able to do that as well. So you want to kind of scale down. If you're in the world of scaling down, you've got to scale down in a way that's mindful of how you might want to stay, you know, scale back up again. Credit lines. Now, I'm not here to be your accountant, and I'm not here to give you financial advice. It's not something I'm able to do. But what I would say is at least have a conversation with your accountant about making sure that you line up what you need and indeed what you may not need while you can. There's a lot of thinking at the moment says money is going to be a bit harder to obtain over the course of the next year or two. So it might be an idea to, you know, borrow an umbrella. Well, the sun isn't shining, but borrow an umbrella while you can, kind of thing. And then finally, and this is really, really important, oxygen mask also is about the pilot being calm and in control. No one likes a panicked pilot, like in the same way that nobody likes sort of desperate doctor. You know, if the doctor's sort of trembling, you're kind of like, that's not great, is it? So for your own benefit, for your team, the thing to be working on here is resilience all the time. You know, remaining calm and conveying belief and doing everything possible to avoid conveying fear, disbelief and panic. This also matters, again, balancing relationships and revenue. Your clients will want to feel that you are also calm and in control. Your clients will want to feel a sense of stability from you as a partner at this time. A sense of, yes, empathy, and yes, help, and yes, proactivity, but also stability. That's about the most important thing that can be communicated right now. So that's a really important set of beliefs around stabilizing there. We've got to do that first. And again, as I say, if we talk about balancing relationships and revenue, this is also where you've just got to make sure that the revenue delivery from existing clients and the capital going out of the door to suppliers, you've got the right balance in place there as well. Do not ignore your own financial health at this time of all times. So when you've done that, then the next stage is to energize. And I'm going to talk to you about a few things when it comes to energizing your business to fight back. But I want to start by just talking about actually not giving energy away. So this sounds like a sort of slightly hippie-ish phrase, I know, but not doing things that are actually harmful to your own positive energy. That's where we should start. So we've stabilized. We're in a good place. We've managed to have all those difficult conversations, or theoretically difficult conversations about revenue. The relationships we got with our clients are in a reasonable place. And now we're starting to think about how we energize, right? So energizing, the first thing we need to do is not give our energy away. And we do that when we start taking bypasses. So there's two types of bypass that we see happening in creative businesses. And this, by the way, is not just about, right now. These things happen actually when times are good as well. And people still make these mistakes. So the first is the values bypass, right? So the values bypass basically belies, shows your good values to be actually fundamentally not true values, right? That's fundamentally what the values bypass does. It belies the quality of your values. So you see things like this: our work has value until you, Mr. Client or external partner, says it doesn't. We do the right thing until you ask us not to do that. You ask us to do the wrong thing. You ask us to do the quick crap thing, for example, and then we'll just do that. We're craftspeople until you need us to bash it out. And we're client partners until you need us to behave like servants, oh master. I'm sure anybody who's worked in the creative industries for a while will recognize those behaviors, if not in themselves, then certainly in other people that they've seen. The problem with values bypasses like this actually is that it undermines the trust and confidence that teams have in leaders, and actually it undermines the trust and confidence that clients have in their agencies, their suppliers, their partners. The reason it does that is because when a client or when somebody internally is asking you to bypass values, what they're doing non-consciously a lot of the time is they're testing you. They're going, if I push on this, will he or she cave, right? And if the answer is yes, bizarrely, we actually lose respect for that individual. So values bypass is actually tremendously damaging. They also undermine our own sense of integrity, and our own actual integrity, which is of course even worse. And they're giving away a lot of positive energy and ultimately allowing a lot of negative energy in. The heritage bypass is kind of similar, but it's just really betraying all the things that you've built up a hard-won reputation for. We're known for discipline mastery. We're absolutely brilliant filmmakers. We're absolutely brilliant art directors, whatever it is, until you need us to turn our hand for anything, which we'll do for a few quid. We've always looked after our people. This is the issue that Richard Branson's been facing with Virgin, in my view. We've always looked after our people until we kick them out, despite having other options. So, of course, furloughing and letting staff go at the moment is one of those regrettable things that a lot of businesses are having to do. But the question really is that a decision that's being made in the best of faith and with great regret, or actually is it just something which just belies perhaps something a bit more self-serving going on there? And when what you do and what you say you do pulls far apart like that, you've got a problem, And we're proud of our smart strategies that helped us get and stay ahead until this crisis, and now we start doing stupid shit. So, I've always said to people, if you built a business on doing stupid shit, you would know that doing stupid shit worked. And you haven't built a business on that basis. You built it by being smart. So why have you now defaulted to doing stupid shit? It doesn't work, right? So there's no excuse. The great question to be asking when anybody tests your values, your heritage, your integrity, The great question to be asking, you don't necessarily need to verbalize this, but it's a good one to be asking inside yourself or perhaps internally in meetings with your team, is this one: what kind of shit business do you think we're running around here? Right? So it's a great question sometimes, just to kind of really check, and build that sense of internal pride, and really make sure that you're on the right track. What kind of shit business do you think we're running around here? So, I have myself occasionally asked that question of clients, and it was taught to me by my coach many years ago, and it does actually have an impact, believe it or not. So that's the first thing about energy. You can only energize if you're keeping the positive energy and not letting negative energy in by doing these kind of bypasses. The next thing then is energizing is about galvanizing your own team. We've got to go out and continue to service clients. We've got to make sure those relationships are in a good place. We need to make sure that actually our team is able to work together really, really well in order to be able to do that. So that really means, firstly, a question of contextual clarity. So talk about the 4 C's of being able to work well. And this particularly applies remotely. Remote working, by the way, is not just like in-person working with Zoom. It's a more fundamentally challenging set of dynamics for that. I wrote an article on that for Forbes a week or so ago. If you put my name up on Forbes, you'll be able to find it. But contextual clarity is everybody understanding what's happening and why. That's the fundamental question for you and your team. Over communication at the moment is really, really important. We're all meaning-making machines. We all sit there and ascribe kind of like narratives to what we see going on around us. And the key thing to bear in mind is that in the absence of any communication, in the absence of somebody explaining what's going on, we will always default to believing the worst or the weirdest thing. That's basically like one of the truths of business as I see it. So we've got to explain, and explain again, basically. And just keep that line of communication, that contextual clarity going with your team. The next thing is companionship. So, we're all very social creatures. We're all missing being in rooms, in pubs, in restaurants, in meetings with each other at the moment. And, Zoom is never going to compensate for that. And so preserving warmth and connection is really, really important with your team at the moment. And stopping everything needing to be about business is a great way to do that. So you might want to have a social half hour, for example, even on Zoom, a social half hour at the beginning or the end of the day. Perhaps do yoga, cooking classes, things like that. And not yoga and cooking together, of course, that wouldn't necessarily work terribly well. But, making sure that companionship is there and is serving you well. Conflict management. So, all good creative businesses are built on dissent. You have to be able to disagree with each other and disagree with each other well in order to do fantastic creative work. Businesses that don't disagree with each other well, they let conflict fester, they become unhealthily political, all those sorts of things. This will be exacerbated now by remote working. So the job is to think through, actually, when we're all not together, when we're all in separate rooms, albeit connected sometimes by technology, how are we going to manage our conflict? And what agreements, which is what contracts, and when I say contracts, I just mean agreements. What agreements are we making around all of that? And then finally, connection. So actually, how do we make sure that, people have got a hell of a time at the moment. They've got to, people with kids have got to be able to balance out homeschooling and exercise and work and, actually family time and all of that in the context of, being quite close quarters a lot as well. So from a work point of view, the thing that needs to be thought through is actually, what is the balance? And most critically, when do we expect people to be off as well as on? Now, I'm going to talk more about this. I think it's really, really important. But agreeing on as well as off times is fundamentally, critical in terms of keeping the balance of energy right in an organisation. Too much on time actually drains energy. It drains it. And off time is really necessary to recharge the batteries. Clients, if you want to balance relationships and revenue, clients that expect their agencies to be always on for them actually are clients that will rarely get the best work out of agencies. And the very best agencies, suppliers and partners, are people that will turn around and make it very, very clear to clients, when they're available and when they're not available. So the 4 C's are really, really important, and you've got to try and achieve balance across them. You want to be inviting feedback from your team and actually from your clients about how you're doing, particularly on things like that on and off connection stuff. And actually just keep experimenting and iterating with tools, platforms, and processes to support all of that. So, we've stabilized the ship, and we've energized in the sense that we've actually recommitted to ourselves about not doing negative things, and we're focused on pulling our team together in this way, and we're managing our clients well in the context of all of that. And the next thing we need to then do is create time for high quality work. So I'm going to talk to you just for a couple of minutes about this concept of deep work versus shallow work. So let's talk about shallow work first. So shallow work is stuff that sort of skims across the surface and actually never really gets to a deeper sort of place. That could be answering emails, for example, or attending a status meeting, or a certain type of client phone call, or project management stuff. All of those kind of things, they fall under the in this bucket of shallow work. They're actually useful work. It doesn't mean to say it's not integral to running a business, but it is shallow. Deep work, for example, is a different type of work. Deep work is creative thinking. Deep work is being able to think strategically about the future. It's about setting vision and intention. It's about reconnecting to our own goals. It's about perhaps collaboration with others to solve really complex problems. All of those things are deep work. Now, the fantastic promise of remote working is that deep work is the promise of deep work. We should theoretically have more time for deep work. Our commutes have been taken away from us. We're not required to be perhaps in quite as many meetings. We can perhaps think about how we partition our diary in different ways. And yes, we may have more responsibilities at home, certainly in the short term, but it shouldn't be beyond the wit of man to be able to go, actually, no, we can carve some time out here to do some proper deep thinking about our business and where we're going. Deep work is also energizing. Deep work is necessary if we're going to be able to have a good quality conversation with our clients about the work we're doing for them. It's necessary also if we're going to be able to pivot what our agency is doing, or develop new products or services that meet the shifting nature of client need. All of those things we've got to find the time to do. And there is a unique opportunity at the moment, both through remote working and also given that we are at the time of this webinar in lockdown, to be able to really carve out the time for deep work. We need to make sure that we're managing our schedule, that we're managing our colleagues' schedules, and again, that we're not allowing technology to be an unhelpful interrupter in this ability. I truly believe that the businesses that actually are going to get ahead and stay ahead over this next phase are the businesses that are going to find the time to do the deep work now that is necessary to get them ready for the future. So my question to you would be, are you, in the context of energizing your business, carving enough time out for deep work? When you've done all that, the next stage of our 3-stage fight back is to strategize. Now, strategies are just high-level plans, really, in the end. They're a high-level plan to get you to an intended destination. Now, a good strategy at the moment needs to be able to answer 7 questions, and answer those 7 questions very well indeed. When I talk about answering them well, what I mean is answering them thoroughly but quickly, answering them in a way that's got integrity, answering them in a way that feels that you and your team are really confident in what you're doing. If you can answer these 7 questions already, you're in a great place, and you will honestly got a great future to look forward to. If you haven't, these are the ones you do need to be thinking about in the context of deep work. And again, answering these questions well will help you balance relationships and revenue well with your clients. They'll help you manage those relationships with intention and with an eye on the future, not just on the present. So the first question is, over the next 6 to 12 months, what does victory look like? So when we're sat here in 6 months' time or in 12 months' time, we're going to have won. What does winning mean? Now, you might say winning means survival. And, I can't comment on your own business and the position that you're in. But what I would say is this: if you seek and set a goal of survival, you may achieve that goal, but you will rarely exceed it. We tend to work to the bars that we set for ourselves. So if the goal that you set for yourself is to survive, you may hit that bar or you may reach that sort of goal, if you will, or you may not. If you set yourself a goal to thrive, if you set yourself a goal to be the best that you can possibly be, to emerge from this time with the strongest business that you possibly can have, you may find actually that maximizes your chances of survival, and also it maximizes your chances of growth. So I think it's really worth thinking very carefully about what victory looks like for you and finding a way to express that which is relevant to the business that you're running. Next one, why is your offering still attractive and compelling in our new reality? I'm going to do 3 as well at this time. How do you expect customer needs to change in the next 6 to 12 months? Okay, so over the next 6 to 12 months, none of us know what's going to happen. We're not soothsayers, we're not fortune tellers, and we're not futurists. And anybody who's a futurist, by the way, well, they didn't necessarily see this coming, did they? Let's just say that. But we can have some hypotheses, nevertheless, about how we expect customer needs to change. We can have some hypotheses about actually where do we think that consumer demand is going to move. For example, what you've always seen in history is over the, whenever big shocks economically or socially happen, people shift from a kind of individualist view to a collectivist view. For example, we may see the demise of individualism a little bit, and therefore the demise actually of things like consumerism in a way. So how would we think about that as agencies? What's our approach perhaps to helping brands manage a world, navigate a world where people are more interested in collective prosperity than individual prosperity? And how might that influence demand for a service? And then going back to your offering, how do you know that your offering is still attractive and compelling in that new reality? So, these are really big questions. You've got to make sure that you're future-proofing your business, you're offering within your business from that perspective. How would you describe your strategy to a 10-year-old is the next question. Now, it sounds a bit reductive, doesn't it, to say describing it to a 10-year-old, but actually what that will do is it will force simplicity into your planning. A simple plan is a good plan. A plan that lacks loads of business bullshit is usually a good plan. It'll be more credible, it'll be more appropriate, and it'll be more communicable. So how you describe a strategy to a 10-year-old is really there to force clarity into what you're thinking about at the moment and what your high-level plan needs to be. And then do your people have the goods, both attitude and skill to deliver your strategy is the next question. So we see this all over the place, that agency owners, particularly really entrepreneurial people, are great at having new ideas about things that they can offer to the market, have a sixth sense for where consumer and customer demand is moving, and are actually pretty good at articulating, therefore, what the business needs to do to take advantage of that. But then fall over because they've actually not built the competencies or built, in a broader sense, the organizational systems and processes to be able to make good on all of that. So, you might be running, I don't know, a filmmaking business at the moment, for example, and then suddenly decide to pivot to become a podcast making business. But everybody in your business is used to visual language, and suddenly you move into a completely different medium. It's got a completely different production process behind it. What great looks like is completely different. And your people may or may not have the skills to deliver on that. And suddenly you've gone from being actually a fantastic video making business to a really quite mediocre podcast making business. And also, to my earlier point, the question is, even if you are pivoting in that way, are you doing so in a way which is actually good practice? In other words, it's consistent with your values and you're not unduly betraying your heritage. So you've got to make sure in the end also that you're building a strategy that your people are capable of delivering on, and that they've got the competencies and they've got the go-get attitude that's necessary to do that, which is why energizing in the way that I talked about earlier is so important. Now the next one, water flows around obstacles. So not to sound too Taoist on you here, but the idea that we need to be bending and shaping and flowing around obstacles, all those things is absolutely critical to business success. What makes your business capable of adapting in this way? That could be an attitudinal thing, it could be about processes, it could be about actually having quite flexible structures, it could be about being able to scale up and scale down with freelance talent. There's all sorts of different ingredients that go on here. But actually there's going to be obstacles arising. We just had a huge one thrown in all of our directions in the form of this virus. But there's going to be more, and they're going to come quickly. And how is your business posed to be able to flow around those obstacles? And then thinking that through further, let's get specific. So what's the main thing that could go wrong over the next 6 to 12 months, and how will you tackle it? Perhaps a client relationship isn't in a great place. And perhaps you've got clients that are behaving really badly, and that's going to continue. And the biggest thing that could go wrong is that actually you've completely misbalanced relationships and revenue and might lose a lot of the latter. So what is that main thing, and what is the strategy that we're building now to tackle it? And then, as I say, within the context of how are we building an organization that can adapt? So thinking all that through, there's some big old questions there. Where's the world moving to? How do we know what great looks like for us? How do we have a clear, compelling, communicable strategy? How do we make sure that strategy sits well within the context of, what we're asking our people to do and what they're capable of doing? And how are we building that adaptive capability? And so when the next issues hit, as they will, as they always do, we're in a place to be able to address that. Those are 7 really big questions. And again, going back to the theme of this webinar, these are questions that underpin all healthy client relationships and all healthy service design and all healthy running of any agency at all. You've got to make sure you're getting these right, particularly right now. To close out, and I just want to very quickly talk to you about how that's done. So I'm hoping what we've shared with you today has been useful. It's, there's a lot to kind of digest there, and I hope some useful and practical advice. If you feel that you need help with this though, we have a service called the 5-day Fight Back. So we've developed this actually using methodologies we've proved out over years now that work really, really well with clients. The core promise here is to take any concerns you've got and over the course of a single week, turn those into strategic certainty. In the end, the 5-day Fight Back is basically, in essence, a rapid response planning process. It's done over 5 days, as the name suggests. It takes a couple of hours a day. It will produce for you a robust and effective single-page plan for the next 3 to 12 months, depending on what the right timescale is for your business, that answers those 7 questions that I talked about earlier on, aligns them really cleanly into your organization, so make sure the strategy is something that you're capable of delivering on, and factors in what may happen in the market as the months go by now. So we've only just launched this particular version of this product, and we're already more than half booked on it for April. So if it is something that you want, I would suggest moving on it, and that would be about talking to us at least about moving on it. And the way to do that would be to email fightback@corporatepunk.com. So if you email fightback@corporatepunk.com, one of the team will get back to you very quickly, and we can have a conversation about if this is right for you. If it's not right for you, there may be other things that we can suggest as well that would be. So that is pretty much, I think, all we've got time for this morning. I'm going to take a few questions in a second, but I just wanted to say I hope what I share with you has been of use, and I look forward to talking with you again very, very soon.